Imagine walking into a hospital in the 1950s, expecting to get help for your anxiety or depression, and walking out as a completely different person. Emotionally numb, your personality erased, your sense of self gone forever. This wasn't science fiction. This was medicine. And thousands of people suffered this fate through one of the most controversial procedures in human history, the lobotomy. Today, on Untold Realms, we're diving deep into the chilling true story of how one misguided discovery led to the destruction of countless lives. How a Nobel Prize-winning doctor became one of history's most infamous medical figures, and how we almost lost an entire generation to a procedure that modern medicine now views as barbaric. Before we go any deeper into this darkness, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to Untold Realms for more untold histories that will shock you, and drop a comment below telling us what aspect of medical history fascinates you most. Now, let's begin. Our story begins not with humans, but with monkeys. In the early 1930s, scientists were experimenting on primates, trying to understand the brain and behavior. What they discovered seemed revolutionary at the time. When they surgically removed or severed connections in certain parts of a monkey's brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, something unexpected happened. The animals became noticeably calmer. Their aggression dropped. They seemed more docile, more manageable. This observation seemed like a breakthrough. Scientists reasoned that if removing part of the brain could calm violent monkeys, why couldn't it work on humans suffering from mental illness? Depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, even criminal behavior all seemed like potential targets for this new cure. But what they failed to understand was the cost of that calmness. What they were actually observing wasn't healing. It was erasure. Enter Antonio Egas Moniz, a Portuguese neurologist who would become the architect of one of medicine's greatest atrocities. In 1935, Moniz decided to take that monkey research and apply it directly to human patients. He didn't ask for extensive testing. He didn't wait for ethical review boards. Those didn't really exist then. He simply decided to operate. His method was brutal in its simplicity. Moniz would drill into a patient's skull and physically sever the connections between the prefrontal cortex and the rest of the brain. The procedure was performed on people with severe mental illness, people who were desperate, institutionalized, and had nowhere else to turn. And here's what's crucial to understand. Initially, some patients did appear to calm down. Their anxiety decreased. Their aggressive behaviors seemed to subside. Moniz published his results to tremendous acclaim. The medical establishment celebrated him. Here was a concrete surgical solution to mental illness, a physical problem requiring a physical solution. In 1949, Moniz was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for this work. A Nobel Prize. For a procedure that would later be recognized as mutilation. But the darker truth was already emerging. Yes, patients were calmer, but at what cost? Many were reporting emotional flatness, an inability to feel joy, sadness, or any deep emotion. Personality changes were dramatic and often devastating. Patients who had been vibrant, creative individuals became shells of themselves. Some couldn't work, some couldn't maintain relationships, some couldn't even recognize themselves in the mirror. But the story gets worse. Enter Walter Freeman, an American neurologist who would take Moniz's procedure and make it even more horrifying. Freeman was an ambitious man, obsessed with bringing lobotomy to the masses. And he had a terrifying idea. What if you didn't need to drill into the skull at all? What if you could perform a lobotomy in minutes, right in a hospital corridor, with minimal equipment? Freeman developed what he called the transorbital lobotomy. The procedure was sickeningly simple. Using an instrument that looked disturbingly like an ice pick, and in fact Freeman sometimes used actual ice picks or leucotomies that resembled them, he would insert the tool above the eyeball, push it through the thin bone of the eye socket and directly into the brain. Then he would move it side to side, severing neural connections. The entire procedure took minutes. Sometimes Freeman did multiple procedures in a single afternoon. What made this even more disturbing was Freeman's evangelism. He travelled across America in a vehicle he called his Lobotomobile, performing transorbital lobotomies in hospitals, psychiatric institutions, and sometimes even in private offices. He was a showman, promoting the procedure as a miracle cure that was quick, affordable, and accessible. Patients who couldn't access traditional neurosurgery could now get a lobotomy from Freeman in a matter of minutes. The procedure exploded in popularity. Thousands of Americans underwent transorbital lobotomies. Patients with severe mental illness got them, but so did people with mild depression, women who were considered too assertive or difficult, people in prison. The criteria for who needed a lobotomy became increasingly broad and increasingly disturbing. Freeman himself performed over 4,000 procedures during his career, and the results were catastrophic. Yes, some patients became calmer, but most experienced severe personality changes, emotional blunting, incontinence, seizures, and cognitive decline. Some became vegetables, alive but not living. Some died from complications. Families reported that their loved ones had been replaced by strangers who wore their faces but had lost everything that made them human. The 1940s and 1950s were the peak years of the lobotomy era. Tens of thousands of procedures were performed across North America and Europe. It became standard treatment in psychiatric hospitals. Desperate families, given no other options, consented to the surgery, hoping it would save their loved ones. Instead, it destroyed them. What's remarkable, or perhaps horrifying, is how long this continued despite mounting evidence of harm. Doctors reported complications. Patients' families complained about personality changes, yet the procedure persisted. Why? Because in the pre-antibiotic, pre-psychopharmaceutical era, there genuinely weren't many other options for severely mentally ill patients. and doctors convinced themselves that a calm, emotionless patient was better than an agitated, suffering one. But everything changed in the 1950s. Two major developments occurred almost simultaneously. First, new psychiatric medications, particularly chlorpromazine, also called thorazine, became available. These drugs could calm agitation and reduce symptoms without destroying the person. Second, and perhaps more importantly, the ethical implications of lobotomy became impossible to ignore. As patients recovered enough to communicate clearly about their experiences, horror stories emerged. People described the procedure as a violation of the most fundamental aspect of human dignity, their own consciousness. By the 1960s, the medical establishment began abandoning lobotomy. It became associated with barbarism, not progress. Freeman's reputation crumbled. He was largely discredited, and the transorbital lobotomy faded from practice. Today, we recognize the lobotomy era as one of medicine's darkest chapters. Over 50,000 people in the United States alone were lobotomized, thousands more worldwide. Many of them are still alive, carrying the scars, both neurological and psychological, of these procedures. Families are still processing the trauma of having their loved ones mutilated in the name of medicine. So, what do we take from this horrifying history? The lobotomy story teaches us several crucial lessons. First, the history of medicine is not a simple march toward progress. Sometimes confident, charismatic doctors with Nobel Prizes can be completely, devastatingly wrong. Second, desperation is dangerous. When people are desperate for solutions, they're vulnerable to exploitation by those claiming to have answers. Third, ethics matter. The rise of institutional review boards, informed consent protocols, and medical ethics committees happened largely because of horrors like the lobotomy. And finally, this history reminds us that the mind, consciousness itself, is sacred. It's not something that should be casually altered, erased or destroyed, no matter how good the intentions. Every person who underwent a transorbital lobotomy lost something irreplaceable, and we can never give it back. Thank you for watching this exploration of one of history's most haunting medical practices on Untold Realms. If this video made you think, if it disturbed you, if it made you question the narratives we're told about progress and medicine, that's exactly what we hope for. Please, like this video. Subscribe to Untold Realms for more untold histories that challenge what we think we know. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you think we've truly learned from the lobotomy era? Or are there modern medical practices we're overlooking that future generations might judge just as harshly? And share this video with someone who loves history, someone who loves psychology, someone who needs to know that progress is never guaranteed and that vigilance is always required. We'll see you in the next one. Stay curious, stay critical, stay human.